This is the April to May unboxing, introduction and build video for the Revell, formerly Matchbox, Canberra PR9. Thank you for coming to watch this. With the Canberra PR9 well established as a light bomber for the Royal Air Force, it was fairly logical to produce a photo reconnaissance version of this high performance aircraft as a replacement for the Mosquito photo reconnaissance variants. The prototype Canberra PR3 made its first flight in the 19th of March 1950, and it was based on the B2 but had special cameras installed and its fuselage was lengthened. The PR7 followed in 1953, and to improve it still further, the high altitude performance of the Canberra for photo reconnaissance and to take it out of the reach of fighter interception as then was, the Canberra PR9 was produced. The prototype PR9 first flew in 8th of July 1955 and being converted PR7. It introduced the Avon 802 turbojets with 5,103 kilograms of thrust and a new long span wing. 22 Canberras were produced by Short Brothers, and they were fitted with a fighter offset canopy and elongated engine nacelles. The PR9 variant remained in service with number 39 Squadron Photo Reconnaissance Squadron until July 2006 for strategic reconnaissance and photographic mapping. Now, its cameras were sufficiently powerful that it could fly well inside the German border and West German border and map targets in East Germany with surprising ease and effectiveness. Nenad probably pissing the Russians off and providing valuable intel during the Cold War. And it was also used by organizations such as Ordnance Survey for photographic mapping, and saw service in the 2003 invasion of Iraq and up to June 2006 in Afghanistan. During a ceremony to mark the standing down of 39 PRU Squadron at RAF Marnham in July 2006, a flypast by Canberra PR9 on the last ever sortie was conducted, and I think in doing so, or around that time, it did many touch and goes around the country, and one of those airfields where it did a touch and go was here at Broughton. And I remember I was walking back to my offices near the A380 building, and I saw this wonderful sound and saw the Canberra PR9 pulling away from the runway at Broughton, which was, well, a beautiful sight to see, to say the least, and something I consider myself fortunate to have caught at just such an opportune moment. So what's going to happen here is the unboxing and then the build vid for the Canberra PR9, the old Matchbox kit, which I am grateful that Revell, in having bought so many old Matchbox molds, is re-releasing it. So this kit's been around for many years, and we'll look at it and then see how it builds up and ways of presenting this very classic British aircraft. So I hope you enjoy the next part of these vids. Oh, one other thing I didn't mention, where I've been fortunate enough to have a good poke around the Canberra. There used to be a Canberra, I think it was a bomber variant, at an aircraft collection near Gatwick. At the end of the runway, there was a private aircraft collection, which sadly isn't with us anymore. A friend of mine was a volunteer there, and I had the fortune many years ago of having a good poke around inside a Canberra and clambering around into the cockpit. And it is a bit of a dark pit, but certainly a fascinating aircraft to delve into. So anyway, enough of this warble, because there's going to be plenty more to come, and enjoy the next part of the vid. So this is the unboxing video for the Revell stroke Matchbox Canberra PR9. Let's quickly pull this out. Fortunate Revell end opening box. Fairly traditional instructions, and then we'll take a look. So separate out the decals, which I hope have stood this test of time. They seem reasonably okay, and we'll start by doing the obligatory looking at the instructions first. So this is, by anyone's estimation, a fairly classic kit. So call out, nice to see some pilot figures. Cockpit is, let's be honest about this, basic. You know, when a pilot's seat sort of sits on a tab like that, you kind of know it's not going to exactly be overflowing with detail. Some instrumentation on the inside for the navigator's position. Not that you're going to be able to see much of it whatsoever, it's just nice knowing that they're there. The fuselage halves come together pretty early on in this build. Now, I would probably suggest if you're building this undercarriage down, Canberra kits have a real habit of being massively tail heavy. So you're probably going to need to stuff anything forward of the undercarriage with as much nose weight as you possibly can. Just put in coins or fishing weights, whatever you can, as long as it's forward of the main gear. Now the main gear is quite far forward on the aircraft itself, so that is, I mean, I'm building this on a display stand, so display base, so I'm not going to worry too much about nose weight. Nice, fairly straightforward, chunky construction. The engines are fairly well blanked off. Options to build it with undercarriage up or down, which is nice. So you have to split the undercarriage bay doors. And then a whole pile of decaling. I would probably say these are Revell decals as opposed to old Matchbox decals. And you've got two options here. I'm probably going to do this option. Mainly because I would struggle to get that colour, so that's the version I'm probably going to be doing. So nothing too dramatic there. I'm not anticipating this creating any major issues. So let's take a look at the sprues. So I'll start off with, here's the wing upper surface. Now this is raised panel lines reflecting the age of the kit. A hint of flash. If you think that when this kit came out in the 1980s/1990s, this would have certainly been in 2 or 3 different colours, and that is sort of reflected by the way the sprues are arranged. So I can see these parts being one colour and each sprue being a slightly different colour, so being a different colour. So very much nice chunky constructions showing its Matchbox heritage. On with the fuselage. Now this feature here, if you can see, is a great indication that this was a Matchbox kit, because this is where it would have said Matchbox UK. So if you see a Revell kit with this kind of marking on the inside, surfaces is a good indication that that was a former matchbox mold. Again, quite fine raised panel line detail and some recessed panel line detail. The recess is a bit heavy, but honestly, once it's painted up, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. Two crew figures. It's nice they sort of get away from having to do the face by putting their oxygen masks on, which is quite good. Keeps them nice and simple. Molded in instrument panel there. Front wheels, again molded with the wheel cover, which is it is what it is. It has the traditional matchbox chunkiness, though nothing I see about it gives me any particular cause for concern. This kind of thing, kit will go together as if it's on rails normally, with a little bit of TLC. On with the lower surfaces, again the raised panel lines are very much in evidence. I'm not going to rescribe this, it's just not worth the effort. That's the interior bay and then the exterior fairing to go over the, well, this is the photographic reconnaissance version. The wheel wells, some detail on the inside face, but not a huge amount. Again, I am not seeing anything on this that gives me anything to particularly worry about. Nice to see decent location points. They always help out with liner. Too often I think there's no attempt is made on that. Will these create any mating issues? I don't think so. I don't think there's going to be too much of a problem. Bearing in mind these kits were designed for youngsters, you know, this would have been around when I was still looking up the sky and dreams of greater things, and you know, this kit would have been for me available in the Harrow model shop when I was a young lad, and so in its original matchbox boxing, I like what I see here. Is it as good as the latest FX one? No, not by a long margin. Will it give you something that looks like a Canberra? Yes. And that to me is what it's about. Because once something like this is, in whatever way you're displaying it, now if somebody wants to nose in and say, oh, this detail's wrong, that detail's wrong, fine, you know, that's cool by me. You know, if it bugs you that much, you go and build your own one, and that'll give you a nice warm feeling of superiority. Frankly, when this is done for me, it will look like a Canberra, and I'm cool with that. On the glazing now, okay, these are the windows for the navigator's position, and they are showing that curse of glazing like this, or shrinkage, and have whopping great dips in it now. So I suppose I could sand them out and all that lot, but again, even if you do correct them, you see so little inside, and a Canberra had a black interior anyway. You know, you might just about catch a little glimpse of Navigator's flight suit, but that's about it. I've polished these out, I've smoothed them out in the past, and it's a lot of ball ache for relatively little return. Some people may apply a drop of crystal clear cement. Hey, if you can do that, and if you're skilled enough with that, that's jolly good. Now let's take a look at the decals now. This, you see, is printed by Revell, so the fact that you've got all these additional decals is very much a good indicator of these are certainly not original Matchbox decals, which would have been far simpler. Now, do I say, am I going to take any guesses? I think there is going to be issues with the carrier film, and I think silvering could be a risk. particularly when you're putting it on the darker surfaces. So that I've got to anticipate. These main ones, and I would say to anybody, if decals, small decals like this are going to be a problem for you, or you find them daunting, my view is start with the big stuff, so like the RF Randall, Squadron Badge, serial, and the aircraft serial on the low wing. Then the markings for the camera locations, so stuff that is big and easily seen. And then basically go down in size until you just can't be asked anymore. And if you leave out some of these tiny ones in yellow, honestly, when you're looking at a model at 4 foot away, it's not going to make much bloody difference. And if there's a whole load of stuff on the lower surface, and somebody else picks up your model, well, first question is, what the fuck are they doing picking up your model, without your permission? And if they know the Canberra so well that they can say, oh, there should have been a hatch marking on there, well, jolly good for them, but don't worry about it, guys. Look at your reference images. Decal up to what is really clearly visible. Beyond that, I wouldn't lose too much sleep over it, guys. I think sometimes the manufacturers maybe go a little bit too far, but if you really feel that you have to do it, but if you're going to go to that level, then you'd rescribe the blooming kit. Or buy an Airfix one, aftermarket decals, and spend considerably more. These are good enough for what they are. I will stick with my usual principle. Start with the big and clearly visible stuff, and then go progressively down in size till I just can't be asked. And I don't see these creating any major issues. So this was the quick, cheap and cheerful unboxing of the Revell, formerly known as Matchbox Canberra PR9, and I am looking forward to building this as a straight up just build a thing build. Probably paint it with a mix of Tamiya and Vallejo in this case, with the nature of the camo scheme. So that's where we are. Progress on the Matchbox 3 Revell Canberra. Yeah, a lot of filling and sanding, and I think I made a bit of a mistake by using Mr. Surfacer so extensively. I should explain. This stuff for me is relatively hard to come by, and to extend it, it can be thinned down with alcohol, which is what I tend to do, and what that tends to mean is the drying time gets longer. So I have used this. It builds up quite well, but then it needs quite a lot of sanding back, and if it settles a bit thick, it does take forever to dry. So I've ended up applying some Revell filler along here. Tomorrow I'm going to start on the rescribing, particularly on the upper fuselage areas and the areas where I think it's going to be the most prominent and make the most difference. So because I'm doing this on a again on a wall mounting on a picture frame, I put in place some blocks. So there's block in there, and that means I can drill through and put some brass rod. Other block I think is going to fit. Thinking about it, I might have to put one to the after. I've been thinking about the spacing of these things, and yeah, I may probably put the other piece so you can see I've created a bit of a step there now. The lower surface will be difficult to see anyway, in this case. So pin there. Ideally I'd want a pin here, but if I end up with a pin here and a pin aft of here, so this area, that might be how it works out best. I'm probably going to put in another block there. This gives some idea of the arrangement now. Overall, yeah, it needs a fair bit of work. No two ways around it. It looks like a Canberra and it looks well enough. It loses so much detail though. In the cockpit, you've got these tiny windows that you can see absolutely nothing in there. I put both crew members in, painted it up as required. I think the bubble top canopy is a better option on this and looks a better aircraft, but it still looks pretty cool. It's still got nice lines, and I do like the offset canopy that has a certain coolness to it. Soon to get to the painting phase, and I'll probably base it into Mia, and then I'll seriously think about using the Vallejo paints over to Mia base, and so that may well be the approach I will be taking. So yes, just being quite busy on the filling and sanding on this thing, and fit is not brilliant, but you've got to accept the age of this kit, and for what it is, it gives you a pretty passable Canberra. So this is the completed Canberra PR9. I'm sorry to jump ahead a bit, but I managed to do one in-build video, get a few pics, and then kind of lost my way a little bit, and I got a bit absorbed in the project. Luckily there are some photos which I'm sort of weaving into this chunk of my nattering. So as I said, I was going to paint this with Vallejo paints, and I did so on a base of Tamiya green. I tend to use this Chromate XF71. Main reason being is that it's a fairly good representation of the chromate colour that's used in the aircraft industry. The chromate paint being designed to latch onto the aluminium surface, the aluminium oxide surface, and it's very tough and adds a additional degree of corrosion resistance and protection. From a machining and health and safety point of view, it's an absolute nightmare of a product, but it has been part of the aircraft industry for years. There are moves to move away from chromate-based primers because of the environmental considerations. Chrome is a heavy metal, it's a pollutant, and it's fairly horrible stuff to deal with, and you really don't want to be breathing in chromate dust, particularly when you're machining through the paint or drilling holes or doing reworking on an aircraft. Anyway, so as pics will show, I started off with a chromate base. I then applied the medium gunship grey. I applied light grey first, so I went for the Tamiya for the light gull grey on the lower surfaces, which creates a nice contrast. Then masked off the lower surfaces, applied the medium gunship grey, that's reference 71.097, and then went for the grey-green RLM 74 for the green tones. Now maybe this is a little bit on the dark side, maybe not. I think again with so many grey tones it very much depends on the lighting. As can be seen, this is a raised panel line aircraft. So after the basic paint went on, again sealed it up with Johnson Clay. And I should explain my painting technique, particularly with camouflage schemes, is I tend to use a mixture of white tack and blue tack, and the only reason I'm using a mix is that the two blobs get blended together, and I have a assorted bag of masking media that I reach for. And I think if you use it for paint spraying and then blend it back together, the progressive layers of paint you add, it actually acts as a little bit of a thinner on your masking medium, making it a little bit softer in repeat use. Honestly, painting this after all the filling and sanding and the rescribing, it went pretty well. Main areas were to add some panel lines to the upper fuselage. Because of the way this model was being displayed, it's difficult to see the lower surface, so didn't worry huge amount about that. The main thing was to lose the main fuselage seam. However, what has emerged is a ghost seam, which is something that we all love that as modelers. So that sort of re-emerged along here a little bit, but it's not all that visible depending upon the light, and as most of it's in the dark green, it's fairly well hidden. So some rescribing on the upper surfaces just to bring out certain distinct panel lines and areas that were obliterated by the sanding. Now all the locations for the these camera spots, I believe, to give crew maintenance access to the cameras, or I believe that, or whatever those were, well, whatever these represent, were lost, and that had to be redone, I'm afraid. And again, a little bit of issue with use of super glue. So I'm reasonably happy with how that went. The decals needed quite a few coats of Microset Microsol. Started with the main decals, and then, as is my habit, I tend to go down in size until I just can't be asked anymore. I did put in these yellow no access areas because they provide a walk path, as they provide a nice visual offset of the yellow against the other tones. And I managed to pick the wrong flipping decal for the navigator's ejection hatch. I found the decal sheet very hard to follow, and the instructions were certainly anything less than clear on placement. In many cases, to read the decal sheet, I had to get a magnifying glass out just to see the printed numbers. The main decals are fine on this. The small detailed decals are a bit of a nightmare to read and see, so I applied as many as I could before I just decided I can't be asked with this anymore, which pretty much ties in with my usual policy. So painting, not too much of an issue, to be honest. I've had far more challenging paint jobs. Use some metallics to hand paint the exhaust nozzle and touch up a couple of areas. Likewise masked the leading edge of the fin, hand painted that, hand painted the panel for the navigator's hatch. And mistake was I should have put de-icing strips on the leading edges of the horizontal stabilizer, so that was my mistake there. The rest of it, not too bad. One thing I did notice when the masking comes off the canopy, that the pilot is sat way too low, and I think if you are doing this kit, you're having the pilot figure in, you need to boost the seat up a little bit because the figure is sat too low in this cockpit. So the fella can barely see over the cowling, and the seat back should be well above the area aft. Should be higher, more visible, put it that way. He sat way too low in there, and I think if you're building this, you need to boost the seat up a bit, put a little bit of plastic shim underneath, as the poor chap can barely see out. Nice little figure though, basic, but a little bit of work, and he provides a nice contrast. There is a second figure in there with the tiny windows on the side, which are so thick you can't see anything in. I mean, the only option is to tell you that those windows there is shine a light from one side and you happen to be able to see a glimmer of it from the other. Possibly should put a little bit of wire in the nose to provide a pitot tube in the nose. Whip aerial made from toothbrush bristle, and then fishing line for the main, I believe the UHF, or long wave primary aerial. Bit connected a bit low on the post, and I wound it around a few times. I'm not a fan of rigging. This is standard fishing line. I need to get some heavier gauge fishing line. I always really struggle with this, and I keep on telling myself I need to order some easy line or look out for it at a model show. So on to the basing. I used, in this case, I went to Google Earth, and I found an image. Well, I selected an image area of Hope in Flintshire, the village of Hope, which is sort of due south of here. Kigali Castle is sort of off in this direction. The area here is from the park in the past, where they adjacent to a lake that had been a quarry, and the park in the past, they are building a Roman fort from new, and it's meant to be a park for living history of early Britain. So that's the excavation there. Now, bearing in mind that this is a Canberra PR9 in markings from 1982, yeah, a little bit off, but what the heck, it's something local. And to be honest with you, considering that the Canberra PR9 would have flown over this area back in 2006, not that inappropriate. So the labels and squadron badge and image again were printed onto adhesive paper and then attached on here. The screen, the frontage is polycarbonate, again cut from the piece I bought at home base. The model is attached with brass rods drilled through. You can see them here, 2 brass rods, and going through to that side, which means you can do it as a stand-up display in model shows as well. So number 39 squadron badge in the top corner, and the aircraft, though in this case with the wingtip tanks as it would have been. So my thoughts and feelings about this: I built this late April after I finished the 2 Mirages. I wanted another build. Didn't want to do special schemes, and this is another of those kits that I've had knocking about in my stash for absolutely ages. You know, it's one of those things you're not sure why you bought it. You bought it with good intentions, and now I was in a Canberra mood, if nothing else. And PR9 aircraft, flying high, photograph of countryside, it just sort of felt right to do. I've got numerous aircraft photos hanging up around the house, and this just felt like something fun to add to it. And it's continuing this theme of different ways of displaying aircraft. Now, for my next build, which is going to be the Harrier series. I'm taking the idea of the label images, the squadron badge, a text and original photo, and again putting them on a base, but this time mounting the aircraft side on with brass rods through it. Honestly, I think, and I seem to have a knack of this, of having too little contrast. I could have done this tone of grey a little bit lighter, but overall I'm reasonably happy with how this came out. Yeah, apart from the decaling issues, this was certainly a fun build. I keep on saying the term fun. I am also going to be honest with you guys, I'm crap at handling doing this super gluing bit, and especially the super gluing of these bloody aerial wires. I always end up with the glue stain like that, and stuffing up these. I find this stuff awkward to do. That's why I suppose most of my builds don't have aerials like this. It's just one of those things I know I need to crack, and I need to get some easy line. We'll see what happens when I use a heavier grade of fishing line. That said, I think it is nice to add it. So, for a few more views, I kept the standoff fairly close in this case. So it only sits about, what, an inch, 25 millimeters from the base. Could have done with a little bit more, but I wasn't going to do any fancy perspective, and I didn't want it poking out too far in this axis. So that's how I've chosen to present it. I think if you see this kit, it's worth getting. The new Airfix Canberras are much better models. Any Canberra though is, you have to really put in a lot of nose weight and find the space for it. The Airfix ones come with a little stand at the back. It seems to be, from a modeler's point of view, an absolute bugger for nose sitting, for sitting on its backside, and needs a lot of nose weight. But with a chunky nose gear, I think you have the the flexibility to do so. If you're doing the bomber version with the nose, you are kind of limited in space and find yourself having to stuff this area aft of the cockpit and forward of the wheels with as much weight as is humanly possible. And I think it was because of the Canberra's model's knack of being an arse sitter that I wanted to display it like this as well, and also that this way I'm not having to tie up shelf space in the cave. So the Vallejo paints, I'm happy with the way they went down, but I do feel they work best on a Tamiya base. Just, it seems to give them something to latch on to. And I know Vallejo primers are a love it or hate it affair. For a while I think they had issues with the batches they were putting out there. I used them once or twice many years ago on a build, and I found them to be a pain in the backside, to be honest. The Vallejo primers, but Vallejo paints I've come to love. Hopefully the more recent Vallejo primers are go down somewhat better and latch on better, but I still think Vallejo in my mind works great with a Tamiya base, and it's a strategy that has worked well for me for quite a while now. Not too much silvering on the decals. I was glad to see hints there on these stripes, but putting these lines on is a bit of a pain in the backside. You can see the raised detail, and to be honest with you, well, so what, quite frankly. It hasn't affected, in my mind, the appearance of the aircraft too much. So that's it. You can see the views. I think displaying a model like this is something that you can do this with any number of subjects. in any number of ways from different perspectives. And in the future, maybe later this year, I may be experimenting with dogfight doubles, using similar sort of display techniques. Which pairs I've been doing background reading research. I don't want to commit myself to anything yet. I would love to do MiG-15, well, MiG-21 combats from things like the India-Pakistani war, Vietnam, and Israel, or the Six-Day War, conflicts like that, where MiG-21s had tussles with various other nations, not always coming off the best. But a recent purchase from Chester Model Centre was a book on MiG-21 aces. So that's a little bit of reading for the future. Again, I'm not sure how I entirely feel about building a aircraft even of a Russian origin at present, but we will see. Maybe not an aircraft in Russian markings, but I do like the MiG-21, and before I decided to do the Harriers for the Century of Conflict builds, I was certainly thinking about doing MiG-21s, but still not 100% happy about doing so. So this is where we are. I am happy with this outcome. I had a great deal of fun with this build, and I hope you guys don't mind this video format, as I had really only done one in-build vid. So I've slipped a few photographs in with this discussion, and thank you guys for listening. Thank you for following this video and this discussion. And so until the next one, this is Johnson, North Wales, signing out. Take care, God bless, and above all else, happy modelling.